Hi, I'm Elliot J. Stocks and welcome to part 2 of the screencast where I'm taking you through how to build a portfolio site. I've been showing you the steps I went through in designing my new site and specifically the portfolio section. Just a brief recap on what we looked at in part 1. We went through the research that I'd done looking at other websites, other portfolios that were doing some great things, trying to take all the good bits from them and keep that in mind whilst actually designing the portfolio. I then showed you the wireframes in Photoshop and talked a little bit about layout and why I wanted to try and do something slightly more interesting, having the way that I worked with the grid and stuff like that, but really also thinking about how keep in mind all of that research about the really great portfolios online, you know, the outer page where you've got the index content of everything, and then the inner pages where you click through and you actually get all the details, the bigger thumbnails, the info about the project, stuff like that. And I also talked about how on the outer page I'd designed a system where there's a kind of featured stuff at the top of the page, and then as you move down it gets into more detail, a bit about clients, a few more featured things, and then you scroll down and you get a kind of sort of browse all section where you can have a look at all the different projects I've done sorted by category. The idea being that I wanted to have one solid page that had everything on it, but then there was only a tiny bit of information about each project to actually get all of the information you have to click through, and then once the user does click through, then you're presented with all the extra stuff so that you can actually go into a lot of detail about each project. So that's what I've tried to do with that. What we're going to do in part 2 of the screencast is look at taking the design from Photoshop, actually making it HTML, CSS. I'll show you how I went about that. And then in the final part of it, look at integrating it into a CMS. Now, I've used WordPress, but a lot of what I'll be saying is going to be equally applicable to any CMS, really, regardless of what you're using. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's get on with the show. Now, in part 1, I mentioned that I'm quite a fan of designing in the browser. Now, that's not to say that I would design everything in a browser. In fact, far from it. I would always work up everything in Photoshop first, and particularly you know, very graphical elements. But there's a fair amount of designing I think you can leave for when you come to the browser. For instance, if you look at the site, there are such things as the borders on the images, which I left to